Guys, so today we are going to talk about CSS, and a great question that I got this morning actually. So let's get into it. So I was reading through some comments this morning, and on one of my CSS tricks videos, or yeah, I think they're called that, there was this great question where the subscriber, or this viewer at least, asked me about, all right, so Fredrik, you seem to have quite a few languages that you feel comfortable in, and my question is basically, do you still enjoy CSS, and like how do you think about CSS, that sort of thing, since you already know a lot of stuff. And I thought this was a great question, and the short answer is that to a point, because the thing is that when you start out with CSS, it's something that is extremely tricky. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. CSS is the sort of thing that it takes you maybe a few days, or I would say that you can understand the concept even as a complete beginner in a very short amount of time. The problem isn't understanding it, because it is designed to be very simplistic. It is very it's very simple if you do it in its base form. The problem comes when you have issues such as, all right, you need to make things responsive, you need to think about how to maintain CSS and how to avoid getting into specificity hell and like legacy code and all that stuff. That's the real challenge of CSS, to get it right and to do things well. And especially if you're a beginner, it gets really tricky to know like how to run animations and how to make things responsive and all that good stuff. But you see, the thing is that for me, the thing that I focus on when it comes to CSS is something that's a little bit different, unfortunately, from what's very popular in the front-end community, or I like to call it web design. I'm sorry I make this distinction, but the thing is that CSS Tricks, the official way, like the big website and all that stuff, maybe I should rename that series from CSS Tricks to like something CSS Tips or something like that, because I don't want to make you think that there's any association, because there's not at all. Chris Coyer and the others are amazing at what they do, but what they focus on is very often the design aspect of things, and that's the thing that I think is that's the thing that I'm not really pushing that as much as other people would. You see, if you go to a code pen, or if you go to something like that, and you try to figure out, all right, what's the next step for me? If you already know CSS and you kind of know how you have a good handle on it, most of the stuff that you're going to find is what I call impractical, beautiful things, and things that are very useful from a design perspective to know, or something that is very beautiful to look at, but it's not very practical. And that's something that that's the thing that I try to go for. Sometimes I throw in something on my video series that's just about, I'm just showing you concepts to kind of show you beginner's perspective, but I also try to make sure that everything that I show you is something that is very useful to know in a daily job. You see, this is one of the main differences between working for a very small design firm, or a design firm of some sort, as a web designer, and working as a front-end developer. As a front-end developer, you need to know about CSS and you need to know about all these different things, but at the end of the day, what you are is a programmer. You are there to write software, and it's very uncommon for you to get to stretch your design aspects, like the design part of yourself. And it's also very uncommon that the things that you see on CSS Tricks, and like these beautiful super animations, you never do make them. It's very rare that you get to actually implement these things in production software when you work for a larger company. It's very common that you can get to do that if you are the designer. If somebody comes to you and asks you to build them a website, and they ask you to kind of represent them, then you are free to do whatever you want. So as a web designer, then you can indulge your need to make amazing animations or make exciting web pages, and you can see, I can, after a few years in the industry, I can very clearly see what web pages have been designed by a very skilled web designer or a small design firm, and what web pages have been designed for large-scale production level, like industry standards. If you want to have an example of that, just go to these, like, if you compare Google's web pages or Facebook's web pages to that of smaller, like more I don't want to say, but they are smaller. Like the scope of the application is usually smaller. The websites that are usually very heavily embellished with animations and videos and all that stuff, you will see a clear difference in the quality, or at the sensation of the quality. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because at large scale, really big companies do not spend that much time trying to make things as beautiful as smaller design firms try to make things. And that's also something that is fairly logical if you really think about it, because at larger scale you have heavier traffics and you have all these other considerations, and it's very rare. It's very rare that you get to do that. So what I like about CSS, and that's why I follow Chris and the others, and I always keep track of web design, is because every once in a while, apart from learning some really cool tricks that I can kind of derive useful information from, every once in a while they show you something that is useful in everyday software development. It's not just something that is a cool design thing. It's not just something that is stimulating. It is something that you can actually use, and that's the thing that I get excited about when it comes to CSS. Figuring out how, or rather looking at how amazing people, like things that amazing people are making, and just reading through the code and understanding, oh, okay, so they're creating a loader or a spinner, they are using these techniques, and I understand like this sort of thing. It's not something that is very obvious. You have to have a little bit of experience, and a lot of experience with a lot of pain trying to make these things yourself. So it's very nice to have these really skilled designers or front-end developers, or whatever you want to call them, making these beautiful, amazing things that I know for a fact I will never build this myself, not for a client or a customer or anything, or a company, but I can learn from it. And with those learnings, I can take them into my real job and actually use them. When it comes to CSS challenges, the biggest challenge you will have, as I said before, is to keep things maintainable over time, and to keep things clean and efficient. Those are the things that are usually challenging when it comes to CSS. And for me, I kind of feel like I have a handle on that. There are different strategies to doing it. Of course, you can always improve, and that's the thing that I try to focus on. But I don't spend as much time with CSS anymore. As I said, I've reached that point where I can produce production level software. But if I wanted to take the next step in my challenges or my skills in CSS, I would probably have to go to a design firm or something like that, where they're focusing much more on the design aspect, and I would have to kind of evolve myself in that area to challenge myself to build more complicated things, because the things that I make with CSS as a professional, as a whatever you want to call it, is very simple in comparison to the things that you see in your newsletters and on CSS tricks and so forth. I don't ever make anything that is as complicated as some of the things that they make, and for good. Sometimes it's because it's simply not a requirement, and sometimes it's because it's just not practical to do it that way. But to summarize, what I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to CSS, I'm sorry to say that it's very rare for you in an enterprise environment that you get to really challenge yourself when it comes to CSS. You learn it to a point where you can maintain it, you can make things responsive, and you can produce the requirements for your customers. But it's very rare that you need to enhance your skills to the point where Chris and the staff of CSS Tricks and the other newsletters actually do. It's not that common in comparison to what everybody else is doing. Hopefully that answers your question. Have a great day.